The champagne glass slipped from my mother's fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the country club. The sound cut through the celebration like a gunshot. Every eye in the room turned toward me, standing in the doorway in my worn civilian clothes, while my sister Sarah gleamed in her pristine navy dress whites. "Ma'am, SEAL Commander." The words hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hayes stood at attention, his weathered face locked in a perfect salute directed at me. The room had gone dead silent, my father's face drained of color, my mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Sarah's engagement party, the golden child's moment of triumph. And here I was, the family disappointment, somehow stealing the spotlight again. But before I tell you how we got to this moment, before I explain why a decorated Marine officer was saluting me in front of my family who'd written me off as a failure, I need you to know something. I need you to understand what it's like to carry secrets so heavy they bend your spine, to sacrifice everything for your country, only to watch your own family celebrate everyone else's service, while pretending yours never existed. My name is Alexandra Alex Chen. For 12 years I lived in the shadows. Not because I was ashamed, but because the mission required it. Tonight, I'm ready to tell you the whole story. But before I do, I want to know you're here with me. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Sometimes the smallest connection can make the biggest difference. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, stories about the people who serve in silence, please hit that subscribe button. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up, the Chen household ran like a military base, which made sense, considering both my parents were career Navy officers. Captain Richard Chen commanded a destroyer in the Pacific Fleet. Commander Lisa Chen ran intelligence operations out of Norfolk. And their daughters? Well, we were expected to follow in their perfectly polished footsteps. Sarah was born for it, 3 years younger than me, but somehow always 3 steps ahead in everything that mattered to our parents. Honor roll student, varsity track captain, debate team champion, she collected achievements like some kids collected Pokemon cards. By her junior year of high school, she already had her appointment to the Naval Academy locked down. Me? I was the problem child, not because I was rebellious or reckless. My sin was being ordinary. B pool grades when Sarah got A's, JV soccer when Sarah ran varsity track, academic clubs when Sarah led student government. Alex has so much potential, my mother would say to her friends. The words dripping with disappointment. If only she applied herself like Sarah does. The truth was, I did apply myself, just not to the things they could see. While Sarah was winning debate tournaments, I was teaching myself computer programming in the garage. While she was at track practice, I was practicing lockpicking with YouTube tutorials. While she was networking at youth leadership conferences, I was reading military strategy books and studying languages online. I was preparing for something, I just didn't know what yet. The breaking point came during my senior year, college application season. Sarah had already been accepted to the Naval Academy with a full scholarship. The pressure was on for me to follow suit. Have you even started your academy application? My father asked one evening at dinner, his voice carrying that edge of controlled frustration I knew so well. I'm not applying to the academy, I said quietly, cutting my chicken into precise pieces to avoid looking at his face. The silence stretched like a held breath. What do you mean you're not applying? My mother's voice was dangerously calm. I mean I'm not going to the Naval Academy. I'm applying to MIT. My father set down his fork with deliberate precision. MIT. Alex, you're a legacy at the academy. Your grades are decent enough. Why would you throw away that opportunity? Because I want to study computer science and cybersecurity. You can study that in the Navy, Sarah chimed in, her voice carrying that helpful tone that somehow made everything worse. The academy has excellent engineering programs. I want to study it in the real world first. My father's face had gone through several shades of red. The real world, Alex. The Navy is the real world. It's service, honor, purpose. Not sitting in some basement playing with computers. I'm not playing with computers, Dad. You're running away, my mother interrupted. Just like you always do when things get challenging. The words hit like a slap. I looked around the table at their faces. Disappointment. Frustration. Sarah tried to look sympathetic, but I caught the flash of relief in her eyes. Relief that she wouldn't have to share the spotlight with her screw-up sister at the academy. That night, I submitted my MIT application. I also submitted applications to 12 other schools, all with strong computer science programs. I didn't tell my parents about any of them. When the acceptance letters started arriving in March, I intercepted them from the mailbox before my parents could see them. MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, Georgia Tech, even my safety schools wanted me. But the letter that changed everything didn't come through the regular mail. It came through an encrypted email that somehow bypassed all my security software and appeared directly on my desktop with a simple message. We've been interested in serving your country in ways your family could never imagine. Reply if you want to know more. I stared at that message for 3 hours. It could have been a scam, could have been foreign intelligence, could have been some elaborate prank, but something deep in my gut told me it was real, and more than that, it was what I'd been preparing for without knowing it. I typed back a single word. Yes. The coffee shop was crowded enough to provide cover, quiet enough for conversation. I sat in the corner booth, nursing my third cup of coffee and checking my watch every 30 seconds. The email had been specific. 2:30 p.m., corner booth. Wear something red. I'd chosen a red scarf, feeling ridiculous but following instruction. At exactly 2:30, a woman slid into the seat across from me, mid-40s, athletic build, unremarkable clothes. But her eyes were scanning the room with the systematic efficiency of someone trained to notice everything. Alex Chen, she said. It wasn't a question. That's me. I'm Agent Sarah Williams. No relation to your sister despite the name. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I work for a department that doesn't officially exist. Running operations that never happened. With people who were never there. My mouth went dry. CIA. Something like that. She pulled out a tablet and showed me a series of images, screenshots of my code from private repositories I'd never shared with anyone, video footage of me picking the lock on the high school computer lab after hours, my transcripts from 3 online courses in cryptography I'd taken under pseudonyms. How did you, Alex? We've been watching you since you were 15, the night you hacked into your school's network to change Jimmy Patterson's grades back after he was framed for cheating. We know when you created that encryption algorithm for your senior project that stumped NSA analysts for 6 hours. We noticed when you taught yourself Mandarin, Arabic, and Russian through online courses you paid for with money from your part-time job. We definitely know. I felt like I was floating outside my body. What do you want? We want to offer you something your family could never understand, a chance to serve your country in ways that matter. Real missions, real impact, real secrets that actually keep people safe. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But it comes with a cost. If you say yes, you disappear. Not dead, not missing, just gone from the world your family knows. They'll think you dropped out, maybe moved abroad. Maybe just lost touch. You'll become someone else, someone who can do the work that needs doing in the shadows. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. What kind of work? Cyber warfare, deep cover intelligence, black ops support. The kind of missions where success means no one ever knows they happened, and failure means people die. She slid a business card across the table. It was blank, except for a phone number. I need an answer in 72 hours. But Alex, before you decide, think about this. Your family already sees you as the daughter who doesn't measure up. We see you as the operative who could change the world. She stood up, left a 20 on the table and walked away. I sat there for another hour staring at that blank card. I didn't tell anyone about the meeting. How could I? Hey mom. Hey dad. A mysterious government agent wants to recruit me for missions that don't exist. That would go over well. Instead, I went through the motions. Graduation was coming up. Sarah was already preparing for her first year at the academy, getting in shape, reading leadership books, generally being perfect. My parents had stopped asking about my college plans. They'd moved into the passive-aggressive phase of disappointment, meaningful comments about how some people couldn't see opportunities when they were handed to them, pointed questions about whether I'd figured out my life yet. The truth was, I had figured it out. I just couldn't tell them. 3 days after my meeting with Agent Williams, I made the call. You've decided, she said without preamble. Yes, but I have conditions. I'm listening. I want to know exactly what I'm signing up for. No vague descriptions. No mysterious promises. If I'm disappearing from my life, I need to know what I'm disappearing into. Fair enough. Can you be at the address I'm about to text you tomorrow at 8 a.m.? The address was a nondescript office building in downtown Norfolk, the kind of place that could house insurance companies or accounting firms. Nothing that screamed secret government operation. The elevator required a key card that Agent Williams provided. We went to the 15th floor, which according to the building directory should have housed generic corporate services. Instead, it housed something that looked like a cross between a Silicon Valley startup and a military command center. Rows of computers manned by people who looked like they could have been college students, if college students routinely carried sidearms and spoke in tactical abbreviation. Welcome to the Cyber Defense Initiative, Williams said. Our official mission is to protect American digital infrastructure from foreign threats. Our unofficial mission is to make sure the unofficial missions of every other agency actually succeed. She led me through a maze of workstations and secure communication booths. Screens everywhere showed scrolling code, satellite feeds, intercepted communications in a dozen languages. We're the support system for operations that can't be supported through normal channels. When a SEAL team needs extraction from a location that officially doesn't exist, we hack the local air traffic control to clear a path. When an undercover agent needs a fake identity that will pass scrutiny from hostile intelligence services, we build it from the ground up, complete with childhood medical records and social media history going back years. She stopped in front of a workstation where a young man was typing so fast his fingers were a blur. Lines of code cascaded down his screen like digital rain. Marcus here, Williams said. Once prevented a terrorist attack on the Super Bowl by convincing their communication system that the game had been moved to a different stadium. The would-be attackers spent the entire day in the wrong city while FBI teams rounded them up. Marcus looked up and grinned. Still my personal best for saving lives per line of code. We moved to another section where the workstations looked more like mission control centers. Multiple monitors, specialized keyboards, heads. This is where we run real-time support for field operations. Sarah, not your sister, our Sarah, once talked a captured CIA operative through disarming a car bomb over a compromised radio while simultaneously hacking the local police network to stage a distraction that allowed his extraction team to reach him. My head was spinning. This was like every spy movie I'd ever seen, except it was real, and they wanted me to be part of it. What would my role be? Initially, training. 6 months of the most intensive education you'll ever receive. Computer science, cryptography, signals intelligence, foreign languages, operational security, physical training, weapons training, psychological resistance training. You'll learn to hack anything, crack any code, disappear into any identity we need you to assume. She paused in front of a secure conference room, where I could see several people in military uniforms studying what looked like satellite photos. After training? You become a ghost. Alex Chen disappears. Maybe she moves abroad and loses touch with her family. Maybe she gets involved with some guy her parents don't approve of and cuts contact. Doesn't matter, as long as they stop looking for her. My stomach clenched. Forever? Operational lifespan varies. Some of our people maintain their cover identities for decades. Others cycle back to civilian life after a few years. Depends on the mission requirements and personal circumstances. What about my family? Do I ever see them again? William's expression softened slightly. That's the hardest part, Alex. The nature of this work means that the people closest to you become security risks. Your family knows your behavioral patterns, your speech patterns, your personal history. If you're running a deep cover operation and you accidentally slip into old habits around them, it could blow years of preparation. She led me to a small office with a window overlooking the city. In the distance I could see the naval base where my parents were. Some of our operatives maintain minimal contact. A phone call on birthdays, maybe. A Christmas card from wherever they're supposedly living. Others find it easier to make a clean break. The choice is yours, but you have to understand that every contact with your old life is a risk to your new one. I stared out at the base, thinking about my parents, about Sarah, about the life I was being asked to leave behind. What if I change my mind? What if I decide this isn't for me? Training is reversible. Once you complete it and begin active operations, it becomes more complicated. We can't have people with detailed knowledge of our methods and capabilities walking around civilian life. But up until you take your first assignment, you can walk away. We'll arrange for Alex Chen to resurface with a plausible story about where she's been. I took a deep breath. Outside I could see Navy ships moving in the harbor. Ships my father might have commanded, carrying out missions that were documented, acknowledged, celebrated. When do I start? Graduation is in 2 weeks. If you're serious about this, you'll need to start laying groundwork for your disappearance. Get accepted to a college, then defer enrollment. Start talking about wanting to travel, maybe do a gap year abroad. Create a narrative your family can believe. She handed me a thick folder. Read this tonight. It contains your cover story, contact protocols, and the beginning of your new identity. Once you open that folder, there's no going back to being just Alex Chen, the disappointing daughter who couldn't live up to expectations. I tucked the folder under my arm. It felt heavier than it should have. Agent Williams? Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever regret it? Leaving your old life behind? She looked out the window for a long moment. I had a daughter once. She'd be about your age now. I haven't seen her since she was 8 years old. My heart clenched. I'm sorry. Don't be. She's alive because of the work I do. So are a lot of other people's daughters. That has to be enough. She turned back to me. Alex, this isn't a job. It's not even a career. It's a calling, and the people who answer it don't do it for recognition or awards or their family's approval. They do it because someone has to, and they're capable of doing it right. And you think I'm capable? I think you've been preparing for this your whole life, without knowing it. The question is whether you're brave enough to step into who you really are. Graduation day dawned gray and drizzly, which seemed appropriate for what I was about to do. I sat through the ceremony in my cap and gown, listening to speeches about bright futures and endless possibilities, knowing this would be the last time I'd sit with my graduating class, the last time I'd be Alexander Chen, high school student, disappointing daughter, ordinary girl with extraordinary potential. My parents sat in the audience, looking proud but distracted. Sarah had come home from her pre-academy summer training for the occasion, resplendent in her Naval Academy preparatory program uniform. She looked like everything I was supposed to be and never would. After the ceremony, we went to dinner at the fancy seafood place downtown, the same place we'd celebrated Sarah's academy acceptance, the same place we'd celebrated every Chen family milestone for as long as I could remember. So, Alex, my father said over the appetizers, have you given any more thought to your plans for next year? I pushed my shrimp around on my plate, building up courage for the lie I was about to tell. Actually, I've been thinking about taking a gap year, maybe traveling a bit. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Traveling? Alex, you can't just wander around aimlessly. You need structure, goals. I have goals, Mom. I want to see the world before I commit to 4 years of college. Maybe do some volunteer work overseas, learn some languages. That's very admirable, Sarah said in her helpful voice. But have you thought about the practical aspect? Where will you live? How will you support yourself? I'd rehearsed this part. Agent Williams had helped me craft a story that would be believable but untraceable. I've been accepted to an international volunteer program. It's called Global Digital Literacy Initiative. They place volunteers in developing countries to help set up computer labs and teach basic digital skills. The beautiful thing about a well-constructed lie is that it contains enough truth to be convincing. There actually was a Global Digital Literacy Initiative. Agent Williams had made sure of that, complete with a website, testimonials, and a mailing address that led to a legitimate nonprofit office. Where would you be placed? My father asked. Probably Southeast Asia initially, Thailand or Vietnam, then possibly Eastern Europe after the first year. My mother set down her water glass. Alex, this sounds very idealistic. But what about your future? What about college? You can't just drift around indefinitely. It's not drifting, Mom. It's service. Isn't that what you've always taught us? That we should serve something bigger than ourselves? I saw the flash of recognition in my father's eyes. He couldn't argue with that logic without contradicting 20 years of his own parenting philosophy. And the program will help with college applications when you're ready? Sarah, yes. They have partnerships with several universities. The international experience actually makes you a stronger candidate. Another beautiful half-truth. The CDC did have partnerships with universities, just not the kind that led to normal college career. The conversation moved on to other topics, but I could feel my parents' uncertainty. This wasn't the path they'd wanted for me, but they couldn't find a reasonable objection to it. 2 weeks later, I was supposedly on a plane to Thailand. Actually, I was in a van with tinted windows, being driven to a facility in the Virginia mountains that didn't appear on any map. The Blackwater-type facility looked exactly like what it was, a place where people learned to become dangerous. Low concrete buildings surrounded by razor wire, with ranges for weapons training, obstacle courses that would have challenged Olympic athletes, and computer labs that hummed with the sound of servers working around the clock. My fellow trainees were an interesting mix: former military who'd been recruited for their specialized skills, recent college graduates with advanced degrees in computer science, linguistics, or international relations. A few people like me, young, technically gifted, willing to disappear from their old lives in service of their country. There was Marcus, a 23-year-old MIT dropout, who'd been expelled for hacking the dean's computer to change his roommate's grades. Elena, a former Army intelligence officer who spoke 6 languages fluently and 3 more conversational. James, a UC Berkeley computer science PhD, who'd been recruited after writing an encryption algorithm that the NSA couldn't crack. And there was David Park, whose story hit uncomfortably close to home. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, he told me during our first week of training, as we worked through cryptography problems that would have stumped professional mathematicians. Korean immigrant family, 3 older brothers, all doctors. I was supposed to be the 4th. What happened? I got accepted to Johns Hopkins Medical School, had the scholarship, the family approval, the whole path laid out. Then I got recruited by the same people who recruited you. He looked up from his computer screen. My family thinks I'm doing Doctors Without Borders work in Africa. Haven't talked to them in 2 years. Do you regret it? Ask me in 5 years when I know if this was all worth it. Our training was unlike anything I could have imagined. 12-hour days, 7 days a week, for 6 months straight. We learned programming languages I'd never heard of, encryption methods that required security clearances, just to know they existed, and communication techniques that could turn a grocery list into a coded intelligence report. Physical training was brutal. I'd never considered myself athletic, but 6 months of military-style conditioning changed that quickly. We learned weapons training, hand-to-hand combat, surveillance and counter-surveillance, lock-picking, safe cracking, and a dozen other skills that no legitimate career would ever require. The psychological training was the hardest part. They broke down our old identities systematically, teaching us to think and act like completely different people. We practiced assuming false personalities for days at a time, never breaking character even during casual conversation. Identity is just a story you tell yourself, our instructor, a woman known only as Raven, explained during one session. The key to deep cover is believing the story so completely that even you start to forget it's not real. We practiced in controlled environments for spend a weekend in a nearby city assuming a false identity, completing objectives while maintaining character, graduate to longer assignments, more complex covers, more dangerous situations. By month 4, I could become Sarah Martinez, exchange student from Spain, or Anna Kim, software consultant from Seattle, or Jennifer Walsh, travel blogger from Portland. Each identity had complete documentation, social media histories, and behavioral patterns that I'd memorized down to the smallest detail. The hardest part wasn't learning to lie, it was learning to live the lies so completely that they became true. 6 months after entering training, I graduated with a class of 12 operatives. We'd started with 28. Some had washed out during physical training, others couldn't handle the psychological pressure of maintaining false identities. A few had simply changed their minds and walked away. The 12 of us who remained were assigned to different divisions within the CDC. Elena went to Human Intelligence Operations. Marcus joined the Cyber Warfare Division. James was assigned to cryptographic research. I was placed in what they called deep integration support. My job was to become whatever identity an operation required, for as long as it required, providing technical expertise and local intelligence while maintaining perfect cover. My first assignment was almost boringly normal. Jennifer Walsh, travel blogger and freelance photographer, spending 3 months in Bangkok documenting street food culture for a popular travel website. The real mission, a Chinese intelligence operation was using Bangkok street vendors as a dead-drop network for communications with assets throughout Southeast Asia. My job was to identify the vendors involved, map the communication patterns, and provide technical intelligence about their encryption methods. I arrived in Bangkok with a legitimate press credential, a professional camera, and a backstory that could withstand investigation by anyone who wasn't specifically looking for deception. For 6 weeks, I ate at street stalls, interviewed vendors, took thousands of photographs, and wrote blog posts that were actually published on a real travel website that had a small but dedicated following. I also identified 17 vendors who were part of the intelligence network, traced their communication patterns back to a coordination center in a noodle shop near Khao San Road, and discovered that they were using a modified steganography technique to hide data in food delivery app orders. The whole operation wrapped up when local authorities, acting on intelligence provided through diplomatic channels, arrested the network coordinators and shut down the communication system. To any outside observer, it looked like routine police work based on a tip from a rival criminal organization. Jennifer Walsh posted a few more blog entries about her amazing time in Bangkok, then moved on to her next destination, Prague, where she planned to document the city's coffee culture. Alexandra Chen, meanwhile, had successfully completed her first operational assignment. No one had suspected her true identity. The mission objectives had been achieved without any indication of American intelligence involvement. I felt proud and empty at the same time. Over the next 2 years, I became a dozen different people in 8 different countries. Maria Santos, studying marine biology in the Philippines. Kate Thompson, working for an NGO in Romania. Lisa Chang, teaching English in Vietnam. Each identity was carefully crafted, thoroughly documented, and completely believable. Each mission was successful. Each time, I sank a little deeper into the gray world of international intelligence, further away from any life that Alexandra Chen might have recognized. I learned things about the world that most people never suspect. How much of international commerce is actually money laundering? How many supposedly independent journalists are actually intelligence assets? How many accidental events are anything but accidental? I learned about the weight of secrets, not just the practical burden of remembering which identity knew what information, but the emotional weight of living in constant deception, of never being able to share your real experiences with anyone, of watching news reports about events you helped cause, but could never acknowledge. The hardest part was the isolation. Even when I was surrounded by people as Jennifer or Maria or Kate, I was fundamentally alone. No one knew who I really was. No one could ever know who I really was. I maintained minimal contact with my family, as Agent Williams had suggested. A postcard from Thailand during my supposed volunteer work. An email from Vietnam, describing my teaching experience. A phone call from Prague to let them know I was safe and happy. The conversations with my parents were stilted, full of lies I'd told so many times they almost felt true. They asked about my students and my volunteer projects, and I gave them stories carefully crafted to be boring enough that they wouldn't want to know more. Sarah was finishing her 2nd year at the Naval Academy, excelling as expected. From what I could gather from these brief communications, she was everything our parents had hoped I would be. They were proud of her in a way they'd never been proud of me, which was exactly what I'd expected, but it still hurt more than I'd anticipated. The breaking point came during my 3rd year of operation. I was in Prague, running a technical surveillance operation against a Russian intelligence cell that was coordinating cyber attacks against NATO infrastructure. My cover identity was Emma Watson, not the actress, a freelance cybersecurity consultant contracted by a local bank to upgrade their network security. It was a long-term assignment, requiring me to maintain the same identity for 8 months while slowly infiltrating the target organization's operational security. Deep cover work of the most demanding kind. 3 months into the assignment, I got an encrypted message through my emergency communication channel. Sarah had been commissioned as an ensign in the Navy and was being assigned to her first ship. My parents were throwing a celebration party. The message wasn't a request for me to attend. It was just information, letting me know what was happening in the life I'd left behind. Standard protocol for long-term operatives to help prevent complete emotional disconnection from their original identity. But reading that message, sitting in a cafe in Prague pretending to be Emma Watson while planning to infiltrate a Russian intelligence operation. I felt something crack inside me. My sister was beginning her legitimate military career with celebration and family support. She would serve her country openly, proudly, with recognition and advancement, and all the things that came with official service. I was serving my country by not existing, by being no one, by never being acknowledged or celebrated or even remembered. That night, for the first time since joining the CDC, I seriously considered walking away. Instead of walking away, I threw myself deeper into the work. The Prague operation was successful beyond expectation. Not only did we identify and neutralize the Russian cyber attack network, but we also discovered intelligence that led to the disruption of similar operations in 6 other European cities. It was the kind of success that would have earned official recognition in any legitimate military operation. Instead, it earned me a brief commendation in a classified file that would never be seen by anyone outside the CDC. But it also earned me something more valuable, a reputation within the organization as someone who could handle the most difficult assignment, which is how I found myself, 6 months later, accepting a mission briefing for what Agent Williams described as the most critical operation of your career. The briefing room was more secure than any I'd been in before. No windows, no electronic devices, no communication equipment of any kind. Just me, Agent Williams, and a man introduced only as Deputy Director Morrison. "What do you know about Phantom Wire?" Morrison asked, without preamble. "Nothing," I replied honestly. "Good." Phantom Wire is a network of Chinese intelligence operatives embedded in American military and government positions. We've been tracking them for 3 years, but we've never been able to identify the full scope of the network or its leadership structure. Williams pulled out a series of photographs and laid them on the table. 2 months ago, one of their communication protocols was compromised. We've identified what we believe is a key coordination meeting scheduled for next month. Where? Norfolk Naval Base. My blood ran cold. My parents' base. The place I'd grown up. The world I'd supposedly left behind. The meeting is being coordinated by someone with legitimate access to the base, Morrison continued. Someone with high-level security clearance and detailed knowledge of operational security. Someone who can move freely without arousing suspicion. What's my mission? Infiltration and identification. We need to know who's running the network, how many people are involved, and what intelligence they've already compromised. Williams leaned forward. "Alex, this is different from your previous assignments. You won't be creating a new identity for this one. You'll be going back to being yourself." I felt the room spin slightly. "What do you mean?" "Alexandra Chen is coming home," Morrison's, the prodigal daughter, finally tired of wandering around the world, ready to settle down and make something of herself. Maybe even consider military service, following in the family tradition. My parents think I've been doing volunteer work in Southeast Asia for 3 years. How do I explain suddenly being interested in military service? People change, Williams said, especially after spending time in developing countries, seeing how the rest of the world lives. It's not uncommon for volunteer workers to return home with a new appreciation for American security and stability. Morrison slid another file across the table. "You'll need to reconnect with your family, establish yourself back in Norfolk, and find a way to get legitimate access to the naval base. Your parents' connections should help with that. How long do I have?" "The intelligence indicates the meeting will happen within the next 6 weeks. You need to be in position and have access to the base within a month." I stared at the photographs of Norfolk Naval Base, thinking about walking back into the life I'd left behind, thinking about facing my parents, my sister, all the people who knew Alexandra Chen as the disappointing daughter who'd run away to find herself. What if they don't believe my story? What if they're suspicious about my sudden return? "Then you adapt," Williams said simply. "Alex, you've become 12 different people over the past 3 years. Surely you can become yourself again." The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of learning to be anyone but Alexandra Chen, my most challenging assignment would be pretending to be exactly who I used to be. The Norfolk airport looked exactly the same as it had 3 years ago. Same tired carpet, same overpriced coffee shops, same mixture of military personnel and civilian travelers that characterized every major city near a naval base. I stood outside the terminal with my carefully aged luggage, wearing clothes that Jennifer Walsh had purchased in Prague but that Alexandra Chen might believably have acquired during 3 years of international travel. My cover story was simple and mostly true. 3 years of volunteer work in Southeast Asia, teaching computer skills and helping set up educational technology programs. Recently back in the States, living temporarily with a friend in Virginia Beach while figuring out next steps. The friend was real, a CDC asset who ran a legitimate nonprofit and could verify my story if anyone checked. My 3 years of supposed volunteer work were documented in carefully created records, testimonials from grateful students, and blog posts that had been backdated to create a believable digital footprint. I'd called my parents 2 days earlier to let them know I was back in the country. My mother's voice had been surprised, cautious. "Where are you calling from?" "Virginia Beach." "I'm back, Mom. Finally ready to come home." The silence on the other end had stretched for several seconds. "How long are you planning to stay?" she'd finally asked. "I'm not sure yet. I was hoping we could talk. Catch up. I know I've been out of touch more than I should have been. Your father and I have dinner plans tonight, but we could see you this weekend." Sarah's home for a few days before her next deployment. Sarah. My perfect sister was now presumably serving on an actual Navy ship, doing actual Navy things, being everything our parents had always wanted both their daughters to be. "I'd love to see Sarah," I'd said, meaning it more than I'd expected to. "I've missed you all," which was also true in its way. So here I was, 3 years later, taking a taxi to my childhood home to begin what might be the most dangerous mission of my career, convincing my family that I was still the same person they'd known before I disappeared into the world of international intelligence. The house looked smaller than I remembered, same neat hedges, same perfectly maintained lawn, same American flag hanging from the porch. I paid the taxi driver and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, gathering my courage. 3 years of deep cover operations had taught me to assume any identity convincingly, but somehow pretending to be Alexandra Chen felt more challenging than pretending to be anyone else. I rang the doorbell. My mother answered, and for a moment, neither of us moved. She looked older, more tired around the eyes. I probably looked older too, though I'd carefully prepared my appearance to suggest someone who'd spent 3 years doing meaningful but not physically demanding work in developing countries. "Alex," she said finally. "Hi, Mom." She stepped aside to let me in, and the smell of the house hit me like a physical force. Lemon furniture polish and coffee and the faint scent of my father's aftershave. 3 years of living in foreign countries, sleeping in safe houses and hotel rooms and temporary apartments, and suddenly I was 17 again, coming home from school. "Your father's in the garage," Mom said. "Sarah's upstairs getting ready. She has to leave tomorrow morning to rejoin her ship." I nodded, setting my backpack down in the foyer. The family photos along the hallway had been updated. Sarah, in her Naval Academy graduation uniform. Sarah, being commissioned as an ensign. Sarah, in various official Navy photos, looking confident and professional, and everything a naval officer should be. No photos of me, which made sense, since Alexandra Chen had supposedly been teaching computer skills to underprivileged children in rural Thailand, not exactly the kind of life that produced formal portraits. "Can I?" I gestured toward the garage. "I'd like to see Dad." Mom nodded. "He's working on that old radio again. He'll be glad to see you." The garage smelled like motor oil and metal polish, and the same aftershave. My father was hunched over his workbench, carefully cleaning the components of a vintage military radio. His hair had more gray than I remembered. "Dad," he looked up, and I saw the exact moment when surprise shifted to something more guarded. "Alex, your mother said you were back." "Yeah, I'm back." He set down his cleaning cloth and really looked at me. I wondered what he saw. His daughter, who'd disappointed him by rejecting the Naval Academy. The girl who'd run off to find herself instead of following the family tradition. Someone who might finally be ready to grow up and make something of her life. "How was Thailand?" he asked. "Educational," I said, which was true enough. Eye-opening, made me appreciate things I'd taken for granted. He nodded slowly. "That's what travel's supposed to do." We stood there for a moment, in the familiar awkwardness that had characterized our relationship for as long as I could remember. My father, who could command a destroyer full of sailors with confidence and authority, never quite knew what to do with a daughter who didn't fit the mold he understood. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about service, about what it means to contribute something meaningful." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh? 3 years of watching how the rest of the world lives. It made me realize how much I'd been taking for granted. American security, American prosperity. The work that people like you and Mom do to protect that. I could see him processing this, trying to figure out if I was serious or just saying what I thought he wanted to hear. I'm thinking about military service, I said. I know it's late. I know I should have figured this out years ago, but I think I'm finally ready to follow the family tradition. His expression shifted to something I'd rarely seen directed at me. Approval. What branch? Navy. I've got a computer science background now. 3 years of international experience. I'm thinking intelligence or cybersecurity. For the first time in my memory, my father smiled at me with genuine pride. That's wonderful, Alex. I know it hasn't been easy, figuring out your path, but sometimes people need to take the long way around to get where they're supposed to be. From upstairs I heard footsteps, and my mother's voice. Sarah. Alex is here. A moment later, my sister appeared in the garage doorway. Sarah had changed. Not just the obvious things, the confident posture, the precision of movement that came from military training. Something in her eyes was different, sharper, more aware. Alex, she said, and something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. Sarah, you look great. Navy life suits you. She stepped into the garage, and I noticed she was holding her phone in a way that seemed casual but wasn't quite. Like she'd been in the middle of something important when she'd heard I was here. Mom said, "You're thinking about joining the Navy yourself." I am finally ready to serve something bigger than myself. Sarah's eyes met mine, and for just a second, I saw something there that made my blood run cold. Recognition, assessment, the look of someone evaluating a potential threat. But then she smiled, and the moment passed. That's amazing, Alex. I'd love to help you navigate the process. Military life is different from civilian life. There are things you need to know. I'd appreciate that, I said. Maybe we could talk tonight, catch up on everything I've missed. I'd love to, Sarah, but I'm actually meeting some friends for dinner, Navy friends. Maybe tomorrow morning before I have to leave. Sure, of course. But as she turned to leave, I caught her glancing at her phone again. And this time, I saw what was on the screen, long enough to recognize it. An encrypted messaging app, the kind used for secure military communications, or intelligence operations. That night, after my parents had gone to bed and Sarah had left for her dinner with Navy friends, I sat in my childhood bedroom and began to process what I'd observed. Sarah's phone, the encrypted messaging app, the way she'd looked at me when she first saw me like she was cataloging details for a report, the careful way she'd asked about my military plans. It could be innocent. Naval officers did use encrypted communications for legitimate purposes, and it was natural for someone to be curious about their sister's sudden career change. But my training had taught me to trust my instincts, and my instincts were telling me that something was very wrong. I activated the secure communication protocol I'd been given for this mission, a carefully modified smartphone that looked like a normal device but could access encrypted CDC channels without leaving digital fingerprints. My handler responded within minutes. Status report. Home base re-established. Family contact initiated. Possible complications. Specify. I described my observations about Sarah. The phone, the messaging app, the look in her eyes. Investigate carefully. Do not compromise cover. Report findings in 24 hours. I spent the next day re-establishing my presence in Norfolk, visiting old high school friends who still lived in the area, stopping by my mother's office on the base to say hello to people who remembered me, creating a normal pattern of behavior for someone who'd recently returned home after years abroad. But I was also observing, listening, gathering intelligence. At lunch with my high school friend Katie, who now worked as a civilian contractor on the base, I casually mentioned my interest in Navy cybersecurity careers. "Oh, you should talk to Sarah," Katie said. "She's involved in some kind of advanced intelligence program. Very hush-hush stuff. She can't really talk about what she does, but it sounds fascinating." Advanced intelligence program. That wasn't what my parents had told me about Sarah's service. They'd mentioned her ship assignment, her role as a junior officer, Her impressive performance review nothing about intelligence work. I visited my father's office that afternoon, ostensibly to ask for advice about military career paths, but actually to access the base personnel directory. Sarah's official record showed her current assignment as USS Hampton, a fast attack submarine, standard junior officer position in operations. No mention of any intelligence programs. That evening, Sarah returned from her dinner looking tired and distracted. She knocked on my door around 10 p.m. "Alex, can we talk?" "Of course. Come in." She sat on the edge of my old bed, looking around the room that had been frozen in time since I'd left for college 3 years ago. Posters of bands I'd liked in high school, textbooks I'd never thrown away, the laptop I'd supposedly taken with me to Thailand. "Tell me about your time overseas," she said. "What was it really like?" I gave her the cover story I'd rehearsed, teaching computer skills in rural schools, helping establish internet cafes in small towns, learning about different cultures and ways of life. The work was rewarding but challenging. The living conditions were basic but adequate. The experience had changed my perspective on service and duty. All true, in its way. I had learned about different cultures, just not in the context she believed. I had been challenged and changed by my experiences, and I was absolutely committed to service and duty, even if she could never know the real nature of that service. "And now you want to join the Navy?" "I think so. I know it's late to be figuring this out, but yeah, I think I'm ready now, in a way I wasn't at 18. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "What kind of work interests you?" "Intelligence, cybersecurity. I've got the technical background, and 3 years of international experience should count for something." "It definitely should." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Alex, can I give you some advice? Please. Military intelligence work is complicated. You deal with classified information, sensitive operations, things that can affect national security. It requires a specific kind of person, someone who can keep secrets, even from family, someone who can make hard choices and live with the consequences." Her tone was serious, almost warning. I looked at her carefully. "I understand that. I think I can handle it." "I'm sure you can. But Alex, once you're in that world, it changes you. You start to see threats everywhere. You start to question everyone's motives, even people you love. It can be isolating." She was describing her own experience, I realized, not giving me general advice about military intelligence careers, but telling me what her own service had cost her. "Sarah, are you okay? You seem different." For a moment, her composure slipped. I saw exhaustion, stress, something that looked almost like fear. "I'm fine," she said quickly, "just tired. Military life is demanding." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Alex, if you do decide to pursue intelligence work, be careful who you trust. Even in the military, not everyone is who they seem to be." After she left, I sat in the dark thinking about that conversation. Sarah was involved in something beyond her official assignment, something that was causing her stress and making her paranoid about trust, something that might be exactly what I'd been sent here to investigate. The next morning, Sarah left early to return to her ship. Our goodbye was formal, distant. She hugged me, told me to stay in touch, and said she hoped my military career plans worked out well. But as she was loading her bag into the taxi, she slipped me a piece of paper. "If you need anything," she said quietly, "anything at all, use this number." I waited until the taxi was out of sight before looking at the paper. It was a phone number, nothing else, not written in Sarah's handwriting. I memorized the number and destroyed the paper. Over the next 2 weeks, I established a routine that would give me access to the information I needed, while maintaining my cover, as Alexandra Chen, returned prodigal daughter, considering military service. I applied for a civilian contractor position in the base's IT department, using my supposed international volunteer experience and actual computer skills. The job would give me legitimate access to base facilities and computer systems while I investigated the Phantom Wire network. My parents were thrilled. Their wayward daughter was finally showing initiative, finally taking advantage of the opportunities they'd always said she was wasting. "I'm proud of you, Alex," my father said one evening, as we worked together in the garage, cleaning components from his radio collection. "I know we haven't always understood each other, but seeing you take responsibility for your future, It means a lot. I felt a pang of guilt that surprised me with its intensity. He was proud of a lie. Everything he was finally appreciating about me was based on deception. But the mission came first. It always came first. My contractor position gave me access to base computer systems, personnel records, and communication logs. Working late shifts allowed me to investigate without drawing attention. What I found made my blood run cold. There were anomalies in the communication log, patterns of data transfers that didn't match normal operational requirements. Personnel accessing classified systems at unusual hours, downloading information they shouldn't have needed for their official duties. And at the center of it all, one name kept appearing: Lieutenant Commander Janet Morrison, Naval Intelligence. Morrison had been accessing phantom wire-related intelligence for months. Her access patterns matched the communication compromises we'd identified. Her security clearance gave her access to exactly the kind of information that had been leaked to Chinese intelligence. But as I dug deeper, I found something that made everything more complicated. Morrison wasn't working alone. She was part of a larger network, coordinating with at least 6 other personnel across different departments. The communication patterns suggested they were planning something significant. Something that required coordination across multiple security levels, and one of the communication nodes in the network was registered to USS Hampton, Sarah's ship. I spent 3 sleepless nights analyzing the communication data, cross-referencing personnel records, trying to understand what I was seeing. The Phantom Wire network was larger and more sophisticated than we'd suspected. It wasn't just a Chinese intelligence operation using American personnel as sources. It was a coordinated effort involving legitimate American military personnel who were deliberately compromising classified information. But why? What could motivate Navy officers to betray their country? The answer came when I cracked the encryption on one of Morrison's communication files. Phantom Wire wasn't a Chinese operation at all. It was an American operation designed to look like a Chinese operation. The personnel involved weren't traitors. They were patriots, members of a rogue intelligence cell that believed the official channels weren't adequately protecting American interests. They were stealing classified information and feeding it to what they thought were Chinese assets. But the Chinese assets were actually American intelligence operatives using the information for unauthorized operations. It was a shadow network within the American intelligence community, running operations that Congress had never authorized, using methods that violated both international law and military regulations. And Sarah was part of it. The communication node on USS Hampton wasn't just receiving information. It was a command center, coordinating operations across the Pacific. Sarah wasn't a low-level operative in this network. She was one of its leaders. My perfect sister, the daughter my parents were so proud of, was running illegal intelligence operations using stolen classified information. I activated my emergency communication protocol. Priority intelligence, network identified. Situation more complex than anticipated. The response came within an hour. Maintain cover. Gather evidence. Do not compromise operation. But I was already compromised, because that night when I came home from my late shift at the base, Sarah was waiting in my bedroom. She was supposed to be at sea. Her ship had left Norfolk 3 days earlier for a 6-month deployment. But there she was, sitting on my bed in civilian clothes, holding a tablet that showed exactly what I'd been accessing on the base computer systems. "Hello, Alex," she said calmly. Or should I say, "Hello, Agent Chen." My training kicked in immediately. Assess the threat. Evaluate escape routes. Determine if the situation could be salvaged or if it was time to abort the mission. Sarah was sitting between me and the door. She was armed. I could see the outline of a concealed carry weapon under her jacket, but she wasn't pointing it at me, and her posture was more resigned than threatening. "How long have you known?" I asked. "About you specifically." 3 days. "About the CDC investigating our operation?" 2 months. She gestured to the chair at my old desk. "Sit down, Alex. We need to talk." I remained standing. "Are you going to arrest me?" "That depends on what you do next." Sarah looked older than she had 2 weeks ago. The stress was visible now. Lines around her eyes, a tightness in her jaw that hadn't been there before. "You want to know what Phantom Wire really is?" she asked. You want to understand why legitimate American naval officers are stealing classified information and passing it to what their superiors believe are foreign agents. I'm listening. 2 years ago, I was assigned to a joint task force investigating Chinese naval expansion in the South China Sea. Routine intelligence work, monitor their ship movements, assess their capabilities, report through normal channels. She pulled up files on her tablet, showed me satellite images of Chinese military installations. What I found was evidence of a planned attack on American bases in the Philippines. Not theoretical, not contingency plan, actual preparations for a coordinated assault designed to drive American forces out of the South China Sea. The images were detailed, clearly showing military preparations that any intelligence analyst would recognize as offensive rather than defensive. I reported it through normal channels, Sarah continued, and nothing happened. The intelligence disappeared into the bureaucracy, classified, compartmentalized, buried under layers of analysis and political considerations. She switched to a different set of communication intercepts, financial records, shipping manifests. So I kept investigating on my own. What I found was worse than I'd thought. The Chinese weren't just planning to attack our bases, they were coordinating with American defense contractors who were deliberately selling them intelligence about our defensive capabilities. My blood ran cold. Corporate espionage? Worse, deliberate sabotage. Defense contractors who decided that Chinese money was more valuable than American security. They were selling information about our weapons systems, our communication protocols, our operational plans. She looked up at me. I had evidence of treason at the highest levels of American defense industry. And when I tried to report it through official channels, I was told to stop investigating. Reassigned to routine duties. Ordered to forget what I'd found. I was beginning to understand. So you went around the official channels. I found other people who'd discovered similar evidence. Naval officers, intelligence analysts. Even some CDC operatives who'd been ordered to stop investigating leads that pointed to American corporate involvement in Chinese intelligence operations. She showed me organizational charts, names and positions of people involved in the shadow network. Phantom Wire isn't about betraying America, Sarah said. It's about saving America from people who are betraying it for profit. We're using unofficial channels to gather intelligence and take action against threats that the official system refuses to acknowledge. By stealing classified information and conducting unauthorized operations, by doing the job we swore to do when we took our oaths to protect and defend the Constitution. Even when our superiors tell us to stop. I stared at the files on her tablet, trying to process what she was telling me. If she was right, if there really was a network of defense contractors selling American secrets to China, then her actions might be illegal, but they weren't treasonous. But there was one thing that didn't make sense. Sarah, if this is all about protecting America from corporate espionage, why did my people identify it as a Chinese intelligence operation? She looked at me for a long moment. Because some of your people are part of the problem, Alex. The CDC has been compromised. There are operatives within your organization who are working to protect the same defense contractors we're investigating. The room seemed to spin. That's impossible, is it? Think about how this mission was presented to you. Chinese intelligence network embedded in American military positions. Clean, simple, patriotic. Us versus them. But did anyone tell you to investigate whether the Chinese operatives might actually be American? Did anyone suggest that the real threat might be coming from within our own defense establishment? They hadn't. The mission briefing had been focused entirely on identifying foreign threats, not internal corruption. Alex, you're here because someone in the CDC wants to shut down our investigation. They want to identify our network and eliminate it before we can expose the real traitors. I felt the ground shifting under everything I thought I knew. Who in the CDC is compromised? I don't know all of them, but I know one name that will interest you. She showed me a photograph on her tablet. Agent Williams, the woman who'd recruited me. The woman who'd been my handler for 3 years. Deputy Director Morrison, Sarah said. Your Agent Williams. She's been feeding intelligence to Lockheed's Classified Projects Division for 2 years. Every operation you've run, every identity you've assumed, every mission you've completed has been reported to defense contractors who are selling American secrets to China. I stared at the photograph, feeling everything I'd believed about my service, my sacrifice, my mission crumbling around me. How do you know this? Because one of your CDC colleagues is part of our network. someone who discovered the same evidence I did and made the same choice I made to serve America, instead of serving the people who are betraying America. She handed me the tablet. Marcus Chen. No relation. Despite the name. Computer specialist, CDC, Cyber Division. He's been documenting the agency's connections to compromised defense contractors for 8 months. The files were extensive, detailed, damning, financial records showing payments from defense contractors to CDC personnel, communication logs showing classified intelligence being passed to corporate contact, evidence of a systematic effort to use American intelligence operations to protect companies that were selling American secrets to foreign governments. This is why you were really sent here, Alex. Not to investigate Chinese spies, to identify the people who are trying to expose American trade. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. The stress, the exhaustion, the paranoia, it all made sense now. She wasn't a traitor. She was a whistleblower, trying to expose treason while staying ahead of the people who wanted to silence her. What do you want me to do? Help us, she said simply. You have access to CDC systems, CDC, intelligence, CDC personnel files. Help us document the full scope of the corruption. Help us gather evidence that can't be buried or classified away. And if I refuse? Sarah's expression hardened. Then you go back to your handlers and report that Phantom Wire is a Chinese intelligence operation that needs to be shut down. Our network gets rolled up, the people trying to expose corporate espionage get arrested or killed, and the real traitors continue selling American secrets with government protection. She leaned forward. But Alex, before you make that decision, ask yourself this. In 3 years of CDC operations, how many missions have you run that actually made America safer? How many of your targets were real threats? And how many were just convenient enemies that justified keeping the intelligence budget flowing to compromised agencies? I thought about my missions. Jennifer Walsh, in Bangkok, investigating a street vendor network that had turned out to be largely harmless. Maria Santos in the Philippines, monitoring marine biology research that had no military applications. Kate Thompson in Romania, investigating an NGO that was actually doing legitimate humanitarian work. None of them had been significant threats to American security. They'd all been operations that looked good in reports, justified budget allocations, kept American intelligence agencies busy with work that didn't threaten any real American interests. Make work operations, designed to hide the fact that the real threats were being ignored or actively protected. How do I know you're telling the truth? I asked. Sarah smiled sadly. Because you already know I'm telling the truth. Your training taught you to trust your instincts, and your instincts are telling you that everything I've shown you fits with what you've observed. You've been wondering why your missions never seemed to matter, why the targets were always small and isolated, why the intelligence you gathered never led to significant operations. She was right. I had been wondering about that. What are you asking me to do? Come with me tomorrow night. There's a meeting of the full Phantom Wire network, naval officers, intelligence analysts, CDC operatives, even some Pentagon civilians, people who've discovered the truth about corporate espionage and decided to do something about it. She stood up, moved toward the door. Meet the people you're supposed to be investigating, Alex. Look them in the eye and decide for yourself whether they're traitors or patriots. After she left, I sat in the dark for hours, staring at the files on her tablet, trying to decide what I believed. Everything she'd told me could be true. It would explain the inconsistencies I'd noticed in my missions, the way my handlers always seemed more interested in maintaining operations than achieving significant results. But it could also be an elaborate deception, a way to turn me against my own agency, to convince me to betray everything I'd worked for. At 3 a.m., I made my decision. I activated my emergency communication protocol and sent a message to my handlers. Cover maintained. Target network scheduling major meeting tomorrow night. Request permission to attend and gather intelligence on full organizational structure. The response came an hour later. Permission granted. Document all participants. Prepare for immediate extraction after meeting. I was going to the Phantom Wire meeting, but I still didn't know whether I was going as a spy trying to expose them, or as someone ready to join them. The meeting was held in a warehouse in Newport News, 20 minutes from Norfolk Naval Base. I arrived with Sarah, both of us dressed in civilian clothes, looking like any two sisters spending time together. The warehouse looked abandoned from the outside, but inside it had been converted into a sophisticated command center. Computer workstations, communication equipment, wall-mounted displays, showing satellite feeds and intelligence summaries. And people, more people than I'd expected. There were naval officers I recognized from the base, including Lieutenant Commander Moore, CDC operatives I'd worked with during training. Pentagon civilians, whose names I knew from classified reports, even a few people in suits who looked like they might be congressional staffers. 23 people total, all of them involved in intelligence or national security in some official capacity, all of them part of what Sarah called the Phantom Wire Network. Marcus Chen stood up when he saw me, same Marcus from my training class, the MIT dropout who'd been recruited for hacking the dean's computer. "Alex," he said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "Sarah said you were ready to hear the truth." "I'm ready to hear something," I replied carefully. The meeting was run by Lieutenant Commander Morrison, the woman I'd originally identified as the center of the suspected Chinese intelligence network. In person she was crisp, professional, absolutely focused. "Before we begin," she said, looking directly at me, "I want to address Agent Chen's situation. Sarah has vouched for her, and Marcus has confirmed her record and capabilities. But we all understand that Alex is currently operating under CDC authority and may have conflicting loyalty." She gestured to a chair that had been set up facing the group. "Alex, before you hear anything else, you need to decide whether you're here as a CDC operative gathering intelligence on a suspected enemy network, or as an American citizen learning about threats to national security that your agency has chosen to ignore." I sat down, looking around at the faces watching me. "How do I make that decision?" "By answering one question honestly," Morrison said. "In your 3 years of CDC operations, have you ever participated in a mission that made America measurably safer from a real threat?" I really thought about it. Bangkok. A street vendor network that was passing messages, but the messages had turned out to be routine business communications, not intelligence. Romania, an NGO that was supposedly laundering money for terrorist organizations, but my investigation had found only legitimate humanitarian work. Vietnam. A teaching program that was supposedly a cover for recruiting assets, but the teachers were actually just teachers. Prague. A Russian cyber attack network that had been real, but smaller and less capable than the intelligence reports had suggested. 6 major operations over 3 years. 2 had involved legitimate but minor threats that could have been handled through normal law enforcement channels. 4 had been complete false alarms, targeting organizations that posed no real threat to anyone. "No," I said finally. "I haven't." Morrison nodded. "That's because the CDC's primary mission isn't protecting America from real threats. It's protecting American defense contractors from investigations that might threaten their profits." She activated the wall display, showing a network diagram that made my stomach clench. "This is what we've discovered over the past 2 years. A systematic effort by defense contractors to sell classified American technology to foreign governments, while using corrupted American intelligence agencies to eliminate anyone who might expose them." The diagram showed connections between major defense companies, Chinese military organizations, and American intelligence agencies, money flowing in multiple directions, information being sold, investigations being suppressed, whistleblowers being silent. Lockheed Martin has been selling F-35 technical specifications to Chinese aerospace companies for 3 years. Morrison continued. Raytheon has been providing missile guidance system details to Iranian intermediaries. Boeing has been sharing cargo plane designs with Russian military contractors. Each accusation was backed by documents, financial records, communication intercepts, evidence that would have been overwhelming if it had been presented in a court of law. And when people within the military or intelligence community discover this evidence, they're either bought off, transferred to irrelevant positions, or eliminated through operations designed to look like foreign espionage or terrorist activity. She clicked to the next slide, showing personnel records. 17 military intelligence officers who discovered evidence of corporate espionage have died in training accidents or terrorist attacks in the past 2 years. 12 CIA analysts who reported suspicious financial connections between defense contractors and foreign governments have been arrested on fabricated charges of selling secrets to foreign agents. Marcus stood up, activated his own presentation. The CDC specifically has been used to create false foreign threats that justify increased defense spending while directing attention away from real security breaches. Your missions, Alex, have all been designed to create the appearance of competent intelligence work while ensuring that no actual threats to corporate profits are identified. The evidence was overwhelming. financial records showing payments from defense contractors to intelligence personnel, communication logs showing classified information being passed to corporate contacts, even recorded conversations between corporate executives and intelligence officials discussing which investigations needed to be redirected. But there was one thing that still didn't make sense. If this is all true, I said, why are you meeting in secret? Why not take this evidence to Congress, to the media, to law enforcement? The room went quiet. Morrison and Marcus exchanged glances. Because we tried that, Morrison said finally. 8 months ago, we presented preliminary evidence to the Senate Intelligence Committee. 3 committee members who expressed interest in investigating our claims died in a car accident 2 weeks later. The rest of the committee voted to classify our evidence and ordered us to stop our investigation. Sarah spoke up from the back of the room. We tried going to the media. 4 journalists who agreed to look into our evidence had their security clearances revoked and their sources criminally prosecuted. One of them is in federal prison right now on espionage charges for reporting information that we can prove came from public corporate filing. We tried going through official law enforcement channels, Marcus added. FBI agents who opened investigations based on our evidence were transferred to field offices in Alaska and Montana. Justice Department prosecutors who considered criminal charges were reassigned to tax fraud cases. Morrison pulled up a final slide. Names, faces, positions. This is what we're really fighting, not just corrupt defense contractors, but a network of corrupted government officials who are protecting those contractors from investigation or prosecution. I recognized several of the names: Senate Intelligence Committee members, senior FBI officials, Pentagon administrators, even some federal judges. They're not all actively corrupt, Morrison continued. Most of them are just people who've been convinced that defense contractor profits are essential to national security. So protecting those profits is patriotic, but the effect is the same. The people selling American secrets to foreign governments are protected by the American government. I stared at the evidence, trying to process the scope of what they were showing me. If it was true, it meant that significant portions of the American defense and intelligence establishment were either corrupt or compromised. It meant that my 3 years of service, my sacrifice of family and identity, and normal life, had been in service of protecting the very people who were betraying American security. It meant that everything I'd believed about my mission, my agency, my contribution to protecting America was a lie. What do you want me to do? I asked. Morrison leaned forward. Help us gather evidence that can't be suppressed or classified. You have access to CDC systems, CDC personnel files, CDC mission records. Help us document the full scope of their operation. Help us create a record that's too comprehensive and too widely distributed to be buried. And then we go public. All of us, simultaneously, military officers, intelligence analysts, congressional staffers, even some federal judges who've been kept out of the corruption. We release everything at once, through multiple channels, with enough corroborating evidence that it can't be dismissed as conspiracy theories or foreign disinformation. Sarah moved to stand beside Morrison. Alex, this is bigger than family loyalty or agency loyalty. This is about whether America is going to be protected by Americans or sold to the highest bidder by people who've decided that profits matter more than national security. I looked around the room at the faces watching me, people who'd given up their careers, their security, their normal lives to expose what they believed was a fundamental threat to American democracy, people who were asking me to do the same thing. How long do I have to decide? 72 hours, Morrison said. After that, we implement the operation, with or without your help, because this can't wait any longer. As I left the warehouse with Sarah, I felt the weight of everything I'd learned, pressing down on me like a physical force. In 72 hours, I would have to choose between loyalty to the agency that had given me purpose and meaning for 3 years, and loyalty to what might be the truth about that agency's real mission. Either way, Alexandra Chen's journey was about to end. I spent the next day going through the motions of my cover identity while wrestling with the most difficult decision of my life. I went to work at my contractor position, investigated routine IT problems, attended meetings about network security protocol, but my mind was entirely focused on the evidence I'd seen in that warehouse, the financial records, the communication logs, the personnel file, the systematic pattern of American defense contractors selling secrets to foreign governments, while using corrupted American intelligence agencies to eliminate anyone who might expose them. If Phantom Wire was telling the truth, then my entire career had been a lie. Every mission I'd run, every identity I'd assumed, every sacrifice I'd made had been in service of protecting the very people who were betraying American security. But if they were wrong, if this was some elaborate deception designed to turn American intelligence operatives against their own agencies, then I was being asked to commit treason against the country I'd sworn to protect. That evening, I called the number Sarah had given me weeks earlier, the one written in handwriting that wasn't hers. Yes, the voice was male, unfamiliar. This is Alex, Sarah's sister. I need to verify some information. Verification requires authentication. State your clearance level and authorization code. I paused. This wasn't the kind of conversation I'd been expecting. I don't have an authorization code. I'm not officially part of your network. Then this conversation is over. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, thinking. Then I called Marcus instead. Alex, is everything okay? Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, in the CDC training program, do you remember Agent Williams ever mentioning anything about defense contractor relationships, any warnings about corporate influence on intelligence operations? There was a long pause. Alex, where are you calling from? My childhood bedroom. Why? Because this conversation needs to happen in person. In a secure location. Can you meet me in 1 hour? We met at a 24-hour diner in Virginia Beach, far enough from Norfolk to avoid anyone who might recognize us. Marcus looked tired, stressed, older than I remembered from our training days. Alex, before I answer your question, I need to know something. Are you recording this conversation? No. Are you wearing any kind of monitoring device? No. Marcus, what's going on? He leaned across the table, lowering his voice. Agent Williams never mentioned defense contractors during our training, because Agent Williams was being paid by defense contractors. She recruited people like us specifically because we were technically skilled, but politically naive. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. What do you mean? I mean the CDC's recruitment program was designed to find people who would be effective operatives, but wouldn't ask inconvenient questions about their missions, people who would focus on completing assignments rather than understanding the larger strategic picture. He pulled out his phone, showed me a series of financial documents. Agent Williams receives quarterly payments from Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Boeing, not as an employee, not as a consultant, as a protected asset, someone who ensures that CDC operations don't interfere with their business interests. The documents were detailed, specific, damning. Bank records showing regular transfers from defense contractor accounts to personal accounts belonging to Agent Williams and at least 6 other senior CDC personnel. How long have you known this? I started suspecting it about 18 months ago, when I noticed that our missions always seemed to target small, isolated threats rather than major organized networks. I started investigating on my own time, using techniques we'd learned in training. He showed me more documents, personnel files, mission reports, financial analyses. What I found was a systematic pattern. CDC operatives are used to create the appearance of effective intelligence work while ensuring that the real threats, the people selling American secrets to foreign governments, are never investigated. I felt sick. Marcus, if this is true, why didn't you tell me before now? Because I wasn't sure you were ready to hear it, and because I wasn't sure you weren't being used to test my loyalty to the agency. The paranoia was understandable, but it hurt to hear it directed at me. So you joined Phantom Wire? I joined people who were trying to expose the truth. Whether you call them Phantom Wire, or patriots or whistleblowers, doesn't matter. What matters is that they're trying to protect America from people who are betraying it for money. He leaned back in the booth, studying my face. Alex, you have to understand something. The choice you're facing isn't between loyalty and betrayal. It's between loyalty to an agency that's been corrupted, and loyalty to the country that agency was supposed to protect. How do I know you're not the one who's been corrupt? How do I know this isn't some elaborate foreign intelligence operation designed to turn American operatives against their own agencies? Marcus nodded. That's a fair question, and I can't prove to you that I'm not a foreign agent any more than you can prove to me that you're not one. All I can do is show you the evidence and let you decide what you believe. He pulled out a tablet, opened a series of files I hadn't seen before. These are communication intercepts from Chinese military intelligence, obtained through NSA channels. They show Chinese officials discussing specific classified American technologies that they've purchased from American defense contractors. The intercepts were in Mandarin with English translation. Detailed technical discussions about F-35 fighter jet specifications, missile guidance systems, satellite communication protocols, information that should have been among the most closely guarded secrets in the American military. But here's the thing, Alec, these intercepts are from 3 years ago. The Chinese have had this information for 3 years, and they've been using it to develop countermeasures against American military technology. He showed me intelligence assessments, military planning documents, strategic analysis. Every American military advantage that our defense contractors sold to China has been neutralized. Our fighters are vulnerable to Chinese air defense systems because the Chinese know exactly how our stealth technology works. Our missiles can be intercepted because the Chinese know exactly how our guidance systems operate. The implications were staggering. If Marcus was right, American defense contractors hadn't just sold secrets to foreign governments, they'd systematically undermined American military capabilities for profit. How many people in the CDC know about this? More than you'd think, fewer than should. The agency has been compartmentalized to prevent exactly this kind of revelation. Most operatives, like you were, work on isolated missions without understanding the larger picture. The ones who do start to see the pattern are either recruited into the corruption, or eliminated from the program. Eliminated how? Marcus's expression darkened. Remember Jennifer Walsh, your cover identity in Bangkok? I nodded. Jennifer Walsh was a real person, a travel blogger who'd started investigating connections between American tourism infrastructure and intelligence operations in Southeast Asia. She died in a motorcycle accident 2 weeks before you assumed her identity. My blood turned to ice. You're saying the CDC killed her? I'm saying Jennifer Walsh died in a very convenient accident that allowed the CDC to use her established identity without having to create a new cover from scratch. And she's not the only one. He showed me more files, death certificates, accident reports, insurance claims, a pattern of convenient deaths involving people whose identities were later used by CDC operatives. This is how the agency maintains operational security, Alex. They don't just create false identities, they acquire identities from people who no longer need them. I felt like the world was tilting around me. Everything I'd believed about my service, my missions, my purpose was collapsing into something horrific. Marcus, if all of this is true, then we're not intelligence operatives. We're accessories to murder. We're accessories to something much worse than murder, Alex. We're accessories to the systematic betrayal of American national security for corporate profit. He closed the tablet, leaned forward again. Tomorrow night, Phantom Wire is implementing their plan to go public with all of this evidence. Congressional staffers, federal judges, journalists, foreign allies, simultaneous release through every channel they can access. What do they want from me? They want you to help ensure that the CDC can't suppress or discredit the evidence. You have access to personnel files, mission records, financial data, information that could prove the full scope of the agency's corruption. And if I refuse, then you go back to your handlers and report that Phantom Wire is a Chinese intelligence operation. The network gets rolled up, the people trying to expose corporate espionage disappear, and the real traders continue selling American secrets with government protection. He stood up, left money on the table for both our meals. Alex, I can't make this choice for you, but I can tell you this. If you choose to stay loyal to the CDC, you'll spend the rest of your career being used to protect the people who are betraying everything you thought you were fighting for. After he left, I sat in the diner for another hour, staring at my reflection in the window, and trying to decide who I really was. Alexandra Chen, disappointing daughter who'd finally found purpose and service to her country, or Agent Chen, skilled operative who'd been unknowingly serving the enemies of everything she'd sworn to protect. By the time I made my decision, the diner was closing, and I was the only customer left. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my childhood desk and composed 2 messages. The first was to my CDC handlers, reporting that I had successfully infiltrated the Phantom Wire network and was prepared to provide intelligence on their organizational structure and planned operation. The second was to Morrison, confirming that I would help Phantom Wire gather evidence against CDC corruption and participate in their coordinated public disclosure. I encrypted both messages, but I only sent one. At 6 a.m., I received a response: confirm, upload all available intelligence immediately, extraction scheduled for F and Ord in 8 hours. I spent the morning at my contractor job, using my legitimate access to CDC-connected systems to download everything I could find: personnel files, financial records, mission reports, communication log. 3 years of evidence documenting the systematic corruption of American intelligence operations, but I wasn't downloading it for my CDC handlers. That afternoon, I met Sarah and Morrison at a secure location in Newport News. I handed over encrypted drives containing everything I'd been able to access. "This is more than we'd hoped for," Morrison said, reviewing the files on a secure laptop. Personnel records for the entire Eastern Regional Office, financial documentation going back 5 years, mission reports for operations we'd only heard rumors about. She looked up at me. "Alex, this information proves everything we've suspected. The CDC hasn't just been corrupted by defense contractor money. It's been systematically redesigned to serve corporate interests rather than national security." Sarah was reviewing financial records on another laptop. "These payment schedules, Alex, they're not just paying individual agents, they're funding entire operational divisions. The CDC is essentially a corporate intelligence service with government cover." The evidence was overwhelming. Defense contractors had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in corrupting American intelligence agencies, and they'd received classified information worth billions in return. "What happens now?" I asked. Morrison closed her laptop. "Now we implement the plan." Congressional briefing scheduled for tomorrow morning. Journalists receiving evidence packages tonight. Federal prosecutors getting financial documentation through secured channels. Foreign allies being notified through diplomatic sources. And the CDC will try to arrest or kill everyone involved before the information goes public, which is why we're all going into protective custody tonight, and why you need to disappear immediately. She handed me a new identity package. Driver's license, passport, credit cards, bank account. Rebecca Thompson, cybersecurity consultant from Portland. "This is a clean identity, created through legitimate channels with no connection to the CDC or any defense contractor. Use it to get as far away from here as possible. We'll contact you when it's safe to resurface." I stared at the documents, feeling the weight of another identity, another lie, another disappearance. "What about my family?" Sarah's expression softened. "Alex, they're going to be safer if they don't know where you are or what you've done. The CDC will investigate them, but they won't find anything because they don't know anything. Will I ever see them again? When this is over, when the truth comes out, when the people responsible are held accountable, yes, but that could take years." I thought about my parents, about the pride in my father's voice when he'd talked about my finally choosing military service, about my mother's relief that I was finally taking responsibility for my future. They would never know that I'd served my country in the most dangerous way possible. They would never know that I'd sacrificed everything to expose the people who were betraying American security. Just like they'd never known that I'd been serving my country for the past 3 years. "There's one more thing," Morrison said. "The CDC is expecting you to report for extraction at 6 p.m. If you don't show up, they'll know you've switched sides. We need you to make contact with them one more time. To tell them what? To tell them that Phantom Wire is a legitimate American intelligence network investigating foreign espionage, and that the CDC's attempts to suppress that investigation constitute treason." My stomach clenched. "You want me to confront my handlers direct? We want you to give them one chance to do the right thing. If there are people in the CDC who genuinely believed they were serving American interests, this is their opportunity to join the effort to expose corruption rather than protect it." She handed me a communication device. "Make contact at the scheduled time, deliver the message. If they're willing to listen, we can work with them. If they're not, then you disappear, and tomorrow morning the world learns that the American intelligence community has been systematically corrupted by defense contractor money." I looked at Sarah, at Morrison, at the evidence of corruption spread across multiple laptops. And if something goes wrong, if the CDC manages to suppress this information, then American national security continues to be compromised by people who care more about corporate profits than protecting the country, Sarah said. And eventually that leads to American soldiers dying because their equipment was designed by enemies who purchased the specifications from American companies. The weight of that possibility settled over me like a physical force. American soldiers, including people like Sarah, dying because defense contractors had sold their secrets to foreign governments. That evening, I made the call to my CDC handlers. Agent Chen, report status. Mission compromised, I said. Phantom Wire is not a Chinese intelligence operation. It's an American intelligence network investigating corporate espionage by defense contractors. There was a long pause. Explain. The people you sent me to investigate are American military and intelligence personnel, who have discovered evidence that major defense contractors are selling classified American technology to foreign governments. They've been conducting unofficial investigations because official channels have been corrupted by corporate money. Another pause, longer this time. Agent Chen, you are experiencing a compromised mental state due to enemy psychological manipulation. Report to extraction point immediately for debriefing and medical evaluation. I'm not compromised, I said. I've seen the evidence. Financial records, communication logs, personnel files. The CDC has been systematically corrupted to protect defense contractor profits rather than American security. Agent Chen, you are in immediate danger. Your cover has been blown, and you are being fed disinformation by hostile agents. Report to extraction point immediately. The dismissive tone, the refusal to even consider what I was telling them, the immediate assumption that I'd been compromised rather than that I might have discovered something important. It confirmed everything Phantom Wire had told me about how the CDC would respond to evidence of corruption. I'm not coming to the extraction point, I said. I'm staying with the people who are trying to protect America from the people who are betraying it. Agent Chen, if you do not report for extraction, you will be classified as a rogue operative and treated as a hostile threat. Then I guess I'm a rogue operative. I ended the call and destroyed the communication device. Rebecca Thompson had a flight to Portland leaving in 3 hours. I never made it to Portland. 2 hours after my call with CDC handlers, as I was driving to the airport with my new Rebecca Thompson identity, my phone rang. Sarah's voice, tight with fear. Alex, don't go to the airport. The CDC has people there. Morrison's been arrested. Marcus is missing. They're moving against the entire network. Where are you? Safe house in Richmond. But Alex, it's worse than we thought. They didn't just arrest Morrison, they killed her, made it look like a suicide in her holding cell. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Morrison, the woman who'd risked everything to expose corruption, was dead, murdered by the very people she'd been trying to protect America from. How many others? We don't know yet. Communication's been sporadic. But Alex, some of the evidence packages made it through. Congressional staffers received them. Journalists are starting to ask questions. Is it enough? We'll find out tomorrow morning. I changed course, heading for Richmond instead of the airport. Rebecca Thompson would have to wait. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a suburban complex, the kind of place that could house college students or young professionals without attracting attention. Sarah was there with 3 other Phantom Wire members I recognized from the warehouse meeting. How did they move so fast? I asked. They were ready for this, said Commander Willis, one of the Navy officers from the Pentagon. They knew we were planning something, and they had contingency plans prepared. Sarah showed me her laptop screen. But look at this. News websites were starting to pick up the story. Not the full revelation we'd hoped for, but enough to start asking dangerous questions. Defense contractor payments to intelligence personnel under investigation. Questions raised about classified technology sales to foreign governments. Navy officers arrested in connection with alleged espionage investigation. The stories were carefully hedged with legal language and official denials, but the basic facts were getting out. It's not enough, Willis said grimly. They'll spin this as a few rogue officers selling secrets to foreign agents. The real story about systematic corporate corruption will get buried under national security classifications. Unless we can get more evidence out there, Sarah said. Alex, the files you downloaded from CDC systems, do you still have copies? I nodded, pulling out the encrypted drives I'd prepared. There's something in there that could change everything, Sarah continued. Financial records showing that the CDC's budget is being supplemented by defense contractor money. Not just payments to individual agents, but funding for entire operational divisions. She opened the files, showed me spreadsheets that made my blood run cold. The CDC hasn't just been corrupted by corporate money, Alex. It's been turned into a corporate intelligence service. Defense contractors aren't just buying information from government agencies, they're funding the agencies themselves. The implications were staggering. If defense contractors were funding significant portions of the CDC's operations, then the agency wasn't working for the American government. It was working for the companies that were selling American secrets to foreign governments. How do we get this information out without Phantom Wire members to deliver it? We don't, Willis said. We find other people, journalists, congressional staffers, foreign intelligence allies, people who aren't part of Phantom Wire but who have the access and credibility to make this information public. I know someone, I said suddenly. They looked at me. My father, Captain Richard Chen, Norfolk Naval Base. He's not part of any intelligence operation, but he has connections throughout the Navy, and he has security clearance high enough to understand what this evidence means. Sarah shook her head. Alex, that's incredibly dangerous. If the CDC is monitoring your family, they are monitoring my family, but they're looking for signs that I'm making contact, not signs that my father is investigating defense contractor corruption on his own initiative. I pulled out my phone. If I can get this evidence to him without revealing my involvement, he could take it through official Navy channels. People who aren't part of the CDC, who aren't beholden to defense contractor money. Willis considered this. It could work. If he approaches it as a concerned naval officer who's discovered evidence of corporate espionage rather than as someone connected to Phantom Wire, how do you get the evidence to him without revealing your involvement? I thought about it. Anonymous deliver encrypted files sent to his official Navy email account with a note suggesting he investigate the sources independently. That's still risky. Digital communication can be traced. Not if it's done right, Sarah said slowly. Alex, you still have access to some CDC communication protocol. If you route the message through their own systems, it will look like internal intelligence sharing rather than outside contact. It was audacious, risky, and probably our only chance. I spent the next 2 hours preparing a comprehensive intelligence package for my father. Financial records showing defense contractor payments to intelligence personnel, communication logs showing classified information being shared with corporate contacts, personnel files documenting the systematic corruption of intelligence operations, all of it packaged and encrypted as if it were routine intelligence sharing between agencies, sent through CDC communication channels to Captain Richard Chen's official Navy email account. The message I included was brief and professional. Captain Chen attached intelligence indicates systematic compromise of classified technology by defense contractor personnel. Recommend independent investigation through Navy security channels. Multiple agencies may be compromised. Exercise extreme caution regarding information sharing outside Navy command structure. No signature, no identification, no indication that his daughter was involved in any way. I sent the message and destroyed all traces of my access to the CDC system. Now we waited to see if my father would act on intelligence from an anonymous source, or if he would report it through channels that might be compromised by the very corruption we were trying to expose. I didn't have to wait long to find out. The next morning, my phone rang. Sarah's number, but my father's voice. Alex, this is your father. I'm using Sarah's phone because I need to talk to you and I'm not sure my regular communication is secure. My heart pounded. Dad, is everything okay? I need you to listen very carefully. I received some intelligence yesterday that suggests serious national security problems. I've been investigating it through Navy channels, and what I've found is disturbing. He paused and I could hear voices in the background. Alex, I need to know, have you had any contact with intelligence personnel since you've been back? Anyone asking questions about your time overseas, your family connections, anything related to national security? I chose my words very carefully. I've been through the standard background check process for my contractor position. Why? Because the intelligence I received suggests that several agencies may be compromised by foreign influence, and because some of the personnel mentioned in these documents are people I've worked with for years. Another pause. Alex, I'm at Norfolk Naval Base right now, in a secure conference room with Admiral Morrison and 2 naval intelligence officers. We've been reviewing the evidence I received and we need to ask you some questions. Admiral Morrison, I wondered if he was related to Lieutenant Commander Morrison, the woman who'd been murdered in her holding cell 2 days earlier. What kind of questions about your overseas experience, your language skills, Your technical background, Alex. The people who've been compromised had access to information about American personnel overseas. If you were targeted for recruitment or manipulation during your volunteer work, he was worried that I'd been compromised by foreign intelligence while supposedly teaching computer skills in Southeast Asia. The irony was almost overwhelming. Dad, I was teaching basic computer literacy to rural students. I wasn't involved in anything that would interest foreign intelligence services. That's what we need to verify. Alex, can you come to the base? We need to conduct a formal debriefing to make sure you weren't exposed to any compromise attempt. I looked at Sarah, who'd been listening to the conversation. She nodded. I'll be there in an hour. The drive to Norfolk Naval Base felt like a journey into a completely different world. 3 years ago, I'd left this place as Alexandra Chen, disappointing daughter who couldn't live up to family expectations. Now I was returning as someone who'd spent those 3 years serving her country in ways her family could never know, only to discover that her service had been corrupted by the very people she'd been trying to protect America from. Security at the base was tighter than I'd ever seen. Multiple checkpoints, extensive document verification, electronic sweeps of all personal items, the kind of security typically reserved for wartime operations. My father met me at the main gate, looking older and more tired than he had just days earlier. Alex, before we go in, I need to tell you something. The intelligence I received yesterday has revealed what appears to be the largest national security breach in American history. We're talking about systematic compromise of classified technology, possibly dating back years. We walked through the base, past buildings I'd known since childhood, toward the secure conference center, where I'd apparently be debriefed about my supposed volunteer work overseas. Dad, how bad is it? Bad enough that we've called in investigators from multiple agencies, FBI, NSA, Naval Intelligence, even some people from agencies I can't name. This isn't just about catching a few rogue operators. This is about determining how much of our national defense capability has been compromised. He stopped walking, looked at me seriously. Alex, I need you to understand something. If you were approached by anyone during your time overseas, if anyone tried to recruit you or gather information about your family connections, you need to tell us immediately. Even if it seemed innocent at the time. I understand. And Alex, I'm proud of you for coming back, for wanting to serve your country through military service. After seeing this evidence of how much our security has been compromised, I'm even more convinced that we need people like you in intelligence work. People like me. If only he knew. The conference room was larger than I'd expected, with multiple workstations and wall-mounted displays showing what looked like organizational charts and financial networks. Admiral Morrison was there, along with 2 naval intelligence officers and 3 people in civilian clothes who were probably FBI or NSA. Ms. Chen, Admiral Morrison said as we entered, thank you for coming in. We know this is irregular, but we're dealing with an extraordinary situation. He gestured to a chair at the conference table. We've received credible intelligence indicating that several American intelligence agencies have been systematically compromised by foreign influence operations. Personnel in those agencies have been selling classified technology to foreign governments for significant financial compensation. I sat down, trying to look appropriately shocked and concerned, rather than like someone who already knew exactly what he was talking about. What does this have to do with me? One of the naval intelligence officers, a woman with commander's stripes, leaned forward. Ms. Chen, we've identified several patterns in how these foreign influence operations recruit assets. They often target Americans working overseas, particularly in technical fields, particularly people with family connections to military or intelligence personnel. She pulled up a file on her laptop. Your background fits that profile perfectly. 3 years overseas, computer science and language skills, family members with high-level security clearances. If a foreign intelligence service wanted to recruit someone with potential access to American classified information, you would be an ideal target. But I was teaching computer literacy to rural students. I never had access to any classified information, not directly, she continued. But foreign intelligence services are patient. They might recruit someone like you with the expectation that you would eventually return to the United States and pursue a career that would give you access to sensitive information. She showed me a series of photographs. We've identified at least 12 Americans working in various overseas capacities, who we now believe were recruited by foreign intelligence services during their time abroad. All of them have since returned to the United States and obtained positions that give them access to classified information. The photographs showed people I didn't recognize, but the pattern was clear: American civilians working overseas in educational or humanitarian capacities, who'd later obtained security clearances and access to sensitive information. The recruitment process is typically very subtle, the other naval intelligence officer added. Initial contact might seem like innocent social interaction, casual questions about your background, your family, your future plans, offers of assistance or opportunities that seem helpful rather than suspicious. I thought about Agent Williams, about that first meeting in the coffee shop 3 years ago, about how she'd presented the CDC recruitment as an opportunity to serve my country in ways my family could never understand. The parallels were uncomfortably exact. "We need you to think very carefully," Admiral Morrison said. "During your 3 years overseas, did anyone show unusual interest in your background, ask questions about your family's military service, offer you opportunities that seemed too good to be true?" I looked around the room at the faces watching me, trying to decide how to answer. These were American military and intelligence officers, people who dedicated their careers to protecting national security. But according to the evidence Phantom Wire had gathered, significant portions of the American intelligence community had been corrupted by defense contractor money. How could I know which of these people were genuine patriots and which were part of the corruption? "There was one thing," I said carefully. "I spent the next 3 hours in that conference room, walking a careful line between truth and deception. I told them about being recruited for volunteer work that turned out to be more than it seemed, about discovering that the organization I was working for had connections to American intelligence operations, about gradually learning that I was being used for missions that had nothing to do with teaching computer literacy. I didn't tell them about the CDC specifically, or about Phantom Wire, or about the evidence of systematic corruption. Instead, I described my experience as if I'd been recruited by a foreign intelligence service that had convinced me I was working for American interests. It was close enough to the truth to be believable, and it gave them a framework for understanding how American citizens could be manipulated into compromising national security without realizing what they were doing. "Chen," Admiral Morrison said when I'd finished my carefully edited account, "you're describing a sophisticated psychological manipulation operation. These people convinced you that you were serving American interests while using you for operations that actually compromised American security." "That's what it seems like now," I agreed. "At the time, I genuinely believed I was helping protect American interests overseas, and you never suspected that your handlers might be foreign agents. They seemed completely American. They knew details about American military operations, American intelligence procedures, American political situations that I couldn't imagine foreign agents having access to." Which was true. Agent Williams and the other CDC personnel had seemed completely American because they were American. They'd known details about American operations because they were running American operations, just not in service of American interests. The naval intelligence officers exchanged glances. "Chen, what you're describing aligns with other intelligence we've received about foreign penetration of American intelligence agencies," the female commander said. "We believe that foreign intelligence services have recruited American intelligence personnel and used them to run operations against other Americans." She pulled up a new file on her laptop. "These American intelligence personnel believe they're running legitimate operations to protect national security, but they're actually being directed by foreign handlers who are using them to identify and compromise American assets." I stared at the organizational chart she was showing me. It looked remarkably similar to what Phantom Wire had put together, but with the roles reversed. Instead of American defense contractors corrupting American intelligence agencies, it showed foreign intelligence services corrupting American intelligence agents. The evidence suggests that several CIA and military intelligence operations over the past 3 years have actually been foreign intelligence operations, run through compromised American personnel, she continued. "Including the operation that recruited me?" "We believe so, and Ms. Chen, this means that everything you did during those 3 years was actually in service of foreign intelligence regardless of what you were told about your mission." The irony was staggering. They were describing exactly what I'd experienced, but attributing it to foreign rather than domestic corruption. What happens now? I asked. Now we need your help, Admiral Morrison said. You have first-hand experience with how these recruitment and manipulation operations work. You understand their methods, their psychology, their operational security. He leaned forward. Miss Chen, we want you to help us identify other Americans who may have been recruited through similar operations. People who believe they're serving American interests but are actually being used by foreign intelligence services. You want me to help investigate people who might be in the same situation I was in? Exactly. Your technical skills, your language abilities, your understanding of how these operations work, all of that makes you an ideal counterintelligence asset. They were offering me essentially the same job I'd been doing for the CDC, but with the Naval Intelligence Service instead. The same work, the same mission, potentially the same corruption. I'll need to think about it, I said. Of course, this is a significant decision, and we understand that you need time to process everything you've learned. My father walked me out of the conference room, past the security checkpoints, back to the main gate of the base. Alex, I know this is overwhelming, he said as we reached my car. Learning that you were manipulated for 3 years, that people you trusted were using you against your own country, it has to be devastating. It is, I said, which was true enough. But I want you to know how proud I am of how you've handled this. Coming forward, cooperating with the investigation, volunteering to help protect other Americans from the same kind of manipulation, that takes real courage. For the first time in my adult life, my father was looking at me with genuine pride and respect, not because I'd finally chosen to follow the family tradition of military service, but because he believed I'd demonstrated integrity and patriotism under difficult circumstances. The pride in his eyes was based on a misunderstanding of what I'd actually done, but the underlying sentiment was real. He was proud of me for trying to serve my country, even when that service came at personal cost. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. How do you decide who to trust in a situation like this, when you can't be sure which agencies or which people might be compromised? He was quiet for a moment, thinking. You trust the mission, Alex. Not the organization, not the people giving you orders, but the mission itself. The Constitution you swore to protect, the country you're trying to serve, the people whose lives depend on you doing your job right. He looked at me seriously. Sometimes the people giving you orders are wrong, sometimes the organizations you work for are corrupted, but the mission, protecting America and Americans, that's always right. Even when it means going against orders, especially then. Alex, I've been in the Navy for 28 years. I've seen good people make bad decisions, because they followed orders instead of following their conscience, and I've seen bad people use legitimate authority to do illegitimate things. He put his hand on my shoulder. The oath we take is to the Constitution, not to any particular person or organization. Sometimes protecting the Constitution means standing up to people who are supposed to be on your side. As I drove away from the base, I thought about what he'd said about trusting the mission rather than the organization, about protecting the Constitution even when it meant going against orders. Phantom Wire had been trying to protect America from people who were betraying it for profit. The CDC had been protecting corporate